For 15 years I hunted a shadow. I gave that shadow 100 names in my own head, imagined 100 faces for it. Not one of them was right. Not one of them was even close. The consequences started on a Monday, all at once, the way an avalanche starts, not with a single stone, but with the whole mountain moving. That morning, Rachel called me. A coordinated smear campaign had erupted overnight against Wren and Sage, and a shell company had filed a predatory legal challenge to her trademark, the very thing she'd fought so hard to protect. An hour later, Grace called. An anonymous complaint had been filed against her nursing license, detailed and false, and precisely calibrated to end a 19-year career. Then Vivian, a sudden, aggressive challenge to the Sinclair Trust, filed by parties who somehow knew exactly how it was structured. Then Catherine, whose competency was quietly being questioned again by new people in a new county. Then a threat, renewed, against Simone's son. Then Nora. Then Elena. Every single one of us, on the same morning, each attack precisely shaped to the exact shape of the woman it was aimed at, hitting the one rebuilt thing each of us loved most, in the one way that would hurt worst. I spent that first day on the phone until my ear ached, and what I heard in each woman's voice was the same thing, and it chilled me more than any of the individual attacks. It was the sound of the old fear coming back. Grace, who had faced down a husband risen from a faked grave without flinching, sounded shaky talking about her license, because her license wasn't just a job, it was the identity she'd rebuilt her whole self around, and he'd known to aim there. Catherine, a woman who had proven her own sanity in a courtroom, went quiet and small on the phone when she said the word competency. Again, because he'd found the exact wound and pressed his thumb into it. He wasn't just attacking our lives, he was attacking the specific, private place where each of us had rebuilt our courage. He'd studied where we were strongest and aimed precisely there, to remind us it could all come down again. I sat in my office with 7 emergencies detonating at once, and one cold understanding rose above all of them. Whoever was at the top of this didn't just know we existed. He knew us. Individually, intimately. He had read every file. He knew Grace's license number, and Vivian's trust structure, and the exact county where Catherine's fear lived. He knew all of us the way I knew all of us. He had stopped sending offers. He was sending consequences. And it was going to lead me, at last, to a face. Let me take you back, but only a little this time, because this is where it all comes due. You know my story now. 15 years ago, my husband, Marcus, vanished, emptied everything, left the debt in my name, made the world look at me like I was the criminal. I lost the baby. I lost everything. And in the wreckage, I understood that Marcus hadn't been clever enough to erase me on his own. Someone had taught him the method. So I built my life into a blade to find the people who sell that method to men like him. I found the vendor, the architect, and took him down. And above the architect, I found the shape of something larger. A coordinator, an institution, a head, the network's people called, always in a lowered voice, the principal. Over years of my own long life, I got closer. Nora, Rachel, Grace, Vivian, Elena, Catherine, each woman who walked through my door broken and walked out a weapon brought me one thread nearer to the top. And in saving Rachel's sister, we finally grabbed a piece of the chain that ran upward, toward him. So I climbed it. We climbed it, together. And the principal felt us climbing. That's what the consequences were. Not random cruelty, a message. I know each of you. I can unmake each of you. Stop climbing, or I erase everything you rebuilt. For most of my life, that message would have worked. A threat like that lands hardest on a woman who is alone. But I wasn't alone anymore, and neither was any of them. Here is what the principal, for all his intimate knowledge of us, did not understand. He'd read our files, he knew our wounds, but he'd learned us as individuals, as 7 separate women with 7 separate weak points, because that's the only way his kind of mind can see people, as isolated targets, as problems to be managed one at a time. He had no idea what we'd become together. When the consequences hit, he expected what always happens: panic, scattering, each woman retreating into her own crisis, too busy saving herself to save anyone else. Divide and erase. It's the oldest play in his book. Instead, we did the opposite. Rachel didn't fight her trademark battle alone. Vivian and Elena, who understood corporate structures and shell companies better than anyone, took it on while Rachel steadied Grace. Grace didn't face her license hearing alone. Catherine, who knew better than anyone how to expose a manufactured record for what it was, built the defense that turned a false complaint into evidence of harassment. Nora ran the master file across all 7 attacks and found what a single panicked woman never could: that they were coordinated, that they shared a fingerprint, that the same handful of shells and handlers sat behind all of them. Simone worked her old channels. Catherine showed her work. Each of us defended by all of us. 7 separate crises, aimed to scatter us, became one shared war that pulled us tighter. I called them all into one room the first night, and I said the only thing that mattered: this is the moment he's built his whole life around. Right now, he expects each of you to go home and fight your own fire, alone, in the dark, too frightened and too busy to help anyone else. That instinct you're feeling, to pull inward, to protect your own, that's not survival. That's the trap. That's the exact feeling he manufactures. So we're going to do the thing that feels wrong and is right. Nobody fights her own fire. You fight the fire next to you, and someone fights yours. I watched it land. I watched Grace, who'd wanted to run home and defend her license alone, breathe out and turn to help Vivian instead. I watched the fear in the room reorganize itself into something with a shape and a direction. That's the whole secret. Fear alone is a cage. Fear pointed in the same direction, together, is an army. And here is the beautiful part, the part that sealed the principal's fate. Every attack he launched was a thread we could pull. To hit Grace, someone had to file. To challenge Vivian's trust, someone had to be paid. Every consequence he sent required people, money, paper, and every one of those was a new string running back up the chain toward him. He thought he was burying us. He was handing us shovels. We stopped defending and started climbing in earnest. Nora's cross-referenced file across all 7 attacks did what no single case ever could. It revealed the coordinating layer. The shells that funded the smear against Rachel also funded the complaint against Grace. The handler who filed against Vivian's trust had moved money for the people threatening Simone's son. 7 attacks, meant to look like 7 separate misfortunes, all traced, when you laid them side by side, to one tightening point at the top. For 15 years I couldn't find the principal because he never touched anything directly. But to erase all of us at once, in his impatience, in his certainty, he'd had to coordinate, and coordination leaves a center. Every line we followed bent inward, toward the same hidden hub. It got dangerous as we got close. That's the part I won't dress up. When you climb toward a man who erases people for a living, he stops sending lawyers and starts sending warnings that don't come on paper. There was a night Vivian's car was followed, a night someone was in Catherine's yard, a message left for me, at my home, that made it very clear the principal knew where I slept. He was trying to frighten us back down the chain. The worst of it came for Simone. One evening a man approached her son on the street, didn't touch him, didn't say anything overtly threatening, just fell into step beside him for half a block, mentioned his mother's name, mentioned the address of his apartment, smiled, and walked away. It was a masterpiece of menace precisely because nothing happened. That's how these people work. They make the air itself a threat. Simone came into the office shaking, and for one terrible moment, I saw the old coercion rising in her again, the old certainty that the only way to protect her boy was to give them what they wanted. And this time, this is what 15 years builds. She didn't carry it alone for even an hour. She walked straight in and put it on the table, and instead of losing her to fear, we tightened a ring of protection around her son that the principal's man never got within a block of again. Every threat he made, we answered not by retreating, but by closing ranks. He was trying to teach us we were vulnerable. He kept accidentally teaching us we were not. He didn't understand that he was dealing with women who had already survived the worst thing that would ever happen to them. You cannot frighten a woman with ruin when she's already been ruined once and rebuilt herself out of the ashes. Fear was his whole toolkit, and we'd each become fireproof the hard way. So we kept climbing, and the hub kept tightening, and one afternoon, Nora looked up from the final thread, the last account, the last name, the identity at the very center of the whole machine, and her face changed, and she said, very quietly, "Diane, you need to see this yourself, and you need to sit down first." I did not sit down. I have never been good at doing the wise thing when it's my own life on the line. I stood over Nora's shoulder and I looked at the name at the top of the chain, a name that meant nothing, an alias, one more mask. And then I looked at the photograph attached to it, the actual man, the face behind 15 years of shadow, the principal. For a second my mind refused it, the way your mind refuses a word in a language you know, but aren't expecting to hear. I actually thought, why is there a picture of Marcus in this file? As if he were a reference, a footnote, a piece of my own history that had gotten mixed into the case by accident. It took a full breath for the two facts to touch each other in my head. This is the face of the principal, and this is the face of my husband. And when they finally touched, the floor of the world I had built dropped out from under me. Because it was Marcus, older, prosperous, gray at the temples now, in an expensive coat, in a city far away, but unmistakably, undeniably, the man I married 20 years ago. The man I thought had vanished as a coward fleeing his debts. The man I'd spent 15 years imagining as one more product of the network, one more husband taught to disappear. He hadn't been a product. He'd been the proprietor. Marcus hadn't run from our life because he was drowning. Marcus had discovered, somewhere in the machinery of his own disappearance, that there was a fortune and a kind of terrible power in it, in teaching men to erase the women who trusted them, in building the structures, in becoming the person other ghosts came to. He had taken the thing that was done to me, and he had built an empire out of doing it to thousands of other women. The architect I took down years ago hadn't taught Marcus. Marcus had taught the architect. I had spent 15 years, my entire rebuilt life, my whole blade of a self, hunting the man at the top of the machine that erases women. And the man at the top was the man who erased me first. I sat with that on the floor of my office, and I felt something I had not felt in 15 years. I felt fooled. Not by a stranger, by myself. Because I had built an entire mythology to survive what Marcus did to me. I had told myself he was weak, a drowning man who fled, a coward taught by cleverer men. That story let me hate him cleanly, and pity myself a little, and get out of bed. And now I had to swallow the truth, that the man I'd built that comforting story around had not been drowning at all. He had looked at the life we built, at the wife who loved him and the child we were making, and he had done the math and decided we were worth less to him than what he could become by erasing us. He hadn't fled our life in a panic. He'd graduated from it, on purpose, with a plan. I had spent 15 years being angry at a coward who never existed, when the real man was something colder that I had never let myself look at directly, because looking at it directly meant admitting how completely I had failed to see him while I slept beside him every night. I want to tell you I stayed standing. I didn't. I sat down, finally, right there on the floor of my own office, and Nora sat down next to me, and I don't know how long we stayed like that. Everything reorganized itself. Every case I'd ever taken, every woman I'd ever saved, all of it, my whole life's work, the sisterhood, this family that ruin had built, all of it, had been, without my ever knowing, a 15-year war against my own husband. I had been fighting Marcus the entire time. Every man I stopped was a man Marcus had trained or sold or enabled. Every woman I pulled out of the dark, I'd pulled out of a dark that's Marcus built. And then the second horror landed, worse than the first. He had known. He had to have known. A man who reads files as thoroughly as the principal reads files. A man who knew Grace's license number and the county of Catherine's fear. That man had known for years that the lawyer hunting his network was his own abandoned wife. He'd known, and he'd let it run. Watched me, from the top of his empire, spend 15 years fighting him without knowing his face. Maybe out of arrogance. Maybe out of some cold amusement. Maybe, and this is the thought I can't put down, because some rotted part of him was proud of what he'd made me into, the same way a man is proud of a weapon he forged. I thought about all the near misses over the years, The cases that had gone strange at the last moment. The leads that had evaporated. The times I'd felt, without being able to name it, that someone was steering just out of sight. It hadn't been bad luck. It had been him. All those years I thought I was hunting in the dark, and the truth was so much worse. I hadn't been in the dark at all. I'd been under a light he controlled, hunting exactly as much as he permitted, winning exactly the battles he let me win, while he watched his estranged wife wage her furious little war, and decided, again and again, that she was more useful, or more amusing, or more precious, alive and fighting than erased. 15 years of my life's work, and I'd been a show he was watching. That was almost the thing that broke me. Not that he'd hurt me, that he'd been entertained. That evening, my phone rang, a number I didn't know. I answered, and I heard, for the first time in 15 years, my husband's voice. "Hello, Diane," Marcus said, warm and easy, the way he used to say it across a breakfast table. "You've gotten so close. I have to admit, I always wondered how long it would take you. You were always the smartest person I ever met. It's why I had to leave you behind. You'd have seen what I was becoming." A pause, almost gentle. "You should stop now. You've built something remarkable, and I'd hate to be the one to take it from you." Again, I did not say the things 15 years had loaded into me. I didn't scream, or weep, or beg for the answer to the only question that has ever truly mattered to me, the one about our child, the one I will not write here. He was counting on all of that. He was counting on the old Diane, the pregnant girl alone in the empty apartment, the woman he'd already broken once, and was certain he could break again with nothing but the sound of his voice. He didn't understand the one thing that had changed. So I told him. "Marcus," I said, and my voice did not shake, which I think surprised us both. 15 years ago you erased me, and it worked, because I was alone. That's the only reason it ever worked. For me, for every woman you've ever done this to. You find her alone, and you convince her she'll always be alone. And then you take everything." I looked up, and around my office door, drawn by the ringing phone, they had gathered. Rachel, Grace, Vivian, Nora, Elena, Catherine, Simone, the whole family his machine had accidentally built. But I'm not that girl anymore, and I'm not alone. You spent 15 years building an empire out of isolating women. I let him hear it, and you spent it, without noticing, building the one thing that could end you, all of us, in one room, who have nothing left to fear, and every reason to come for you. There was a silence on the line, and for the first time in the entire 15 years, I heard, underneath my husband's easy warmth, the smallest thread of something new. I heard him understand that he'd made a mistake. He hung up, and the room was very quiet. I looked around at them, at the women he would have picked off one by one in the dark without ever breaking a sweat, now standing in a circle he couldn't break because he'd never once, in his whole life, understood what a circle even is. And I told them the truth, all of it, because the sisterhood does not do to each other what the network does. No secrets, no carrying it alone. "The man we've been hunting," I said, "is my husband. The principal is Marcus. He built all of it, every method, every ghost, every ruin. He started with me. I made myself say the rest. And I need you to know that, because it means this isn't a case anymore. It's personal, and it's mine, and any one of you would be right to walk away from a war this dangerous, now that we know how high it goes." Nobody moved. Grace crossed her arms. "He filed against my license, Diane. It's personal for me too." Vivian, quiet steel. "He came for Harold's trust. Mine as well." Rachel. "He used my sister." Catherine. "He tried to make me doubt my own mind." Again. One by one. Around that room, each of them claimed it, until it wasn't my war anymore. It was ours. It had always, secretly, been all of ours. "He thinks he's coming for the woman who hunts him," Nora said simply. "He has no idea he's coming for all of us." We sat together long into that night, not planning yet, just sitting, the way you sit with someone after a death, because in a way one had happened. The last version of Marcus I'd allowed myself to keep, the drowning coward I could pity, had died on the floor of my office that afternoon, and what replaced him was colder and clearer and, strangely, easier to fight. You cannot go to war against a man you're still secretly grieving. Now there was nothing left to grieve. He had made sure of that himself, with one phone call, in the warm, easy voice he used to use across our breakfast table. He'd meant it to frighten me back into the dark. Instead, he'd cut the last thread that tied my hands. Grace put a cup of tea in my hands at some point and didn't say anything, and Simone sat on the arm of my chair, and Rachel and her steady eyes stayed until dawn. Nobody left. That, too, is the whole thing. On the worst night of my life 15 years ago, I sat alone on a mattress on the floor and no one came. On the worst night of my life this time, I couldn't have been alone if I'd tried. I don't have a clean ending for you tonight. For the first time in this whole long story, I can't give you the moment where the folder opens and the villain's face goes gray, because that moment hasn't happened yet. Marcus is still out there. At the top of a machine I now understand I've been dismantling one brick at a time for 15 years without ever knowing I was aiming at my own front door. But I can tell you what I know. I know that the girl he erased 15 years ago faced her ruin completely alone, in an empty apartment, certain no one on earth believed her, and I know that the woman he has to face now stands in a room full of people who survived him, who love each other, and who do not lose when they're together. I know that he built his entire empire on a single idea, that a woman, alone, can be erased. And I know that idea is about to meet the one thing it was never designed to survive, a woman who was erased, and came back, and brought everyone. He took everything from me once, in the dark, while no one was watching. He's about to find out what I built out of that nothing, and it has all of our names on it. End of episode 10. Series note. Tease in your outro plus pinned comment. The principal is Marcus. Diane's war was personal all along. Now the woman he erased 15 years ago is coming for the empire he built on her ruin. And this time she isn't alone. Episode 11. The reckoning begins. And Diane learns the one truth about that night 15 years ago that changes everything.